There are some obvious signs of fear in organization. You could talk about turnover, especially turnover of your best talent. That's a huge indicator of fear. You have disengagement. That's something that organizations will often bring us is their employee engagement data. And they'll say, I think we have a problem. Like, yeah, you do. And then we peel it back and we start to see, okay, there's some fear lurking here. But then there are some non-obvious signs of fear that I think are worth talking about. But before we do that, we want to talk about why fear is bad for an organization. Mm-hmm. It may seem obvious, but we want to put it to a finer point that fear breaks the feedback loop. I like this slide. Fear breaks the feedback loop. That feedback loop in our minds is the crux of the issue. Why is the feedback loop so important?
The feedback loop, Junior, in an organization, let's think about the nature of an organization. An organization is built as a hierarchy, right? So it's like a pyramid. And we have a division of labor, we have roles and responsibilities, and this is the way that we organize. So the hierarchy is not inherently bad. But with the hierarchy, the decision makers for the entire organization are at the top, and they make decisions and then they communicate those decisions down as far as who we are, what's our strategy, what are our priorities, how do we allocate scarce resources, things like that. And moving that information down is not so difficult, to be honest. That's the top-down cascade. Here's the challenge. In organizations across the world, the challenge is how do you move information back up? How do you do bottom-up transfer of information? And so what we need from the bottom is we need to circulate back up what they have, the knowledge assets that they have at the bottom of the organization, we refer to as local knowledge. And so the organizations that become most adaptable, that develop the agility to be able to sustain their competitive advantage, they circulate local knowledge from the bottom of the organization, right? And that's essential. As I said, top-down cascade, that's not very hard. But moving that information back up through the organization is very difficult. What does fear do? Where does fear play in this entire equation? If fear breaks the feedback loop, we lose the ability to circulate local knowledge from the bottom of the organization and also from side to side. So the lateral movement, of local knowledge, the bottom-up movement of local knowledge, the way that we move around information and knowledge assets is repressed. That's what we're talking about. Think about the magnitude of that challenge organizationally.
Well, part of what fascinates me about this idea is that it doesn't negate the existence of that local knowledge. The information isn't going anywhere, and then literally not going anywhere, but it's there. People have the understanding, they have the information, they're just choosing not to pass it along.
Right.
And so organizations are often in search of answers that they already have. They just don't know that they have them. And the transfer of the local knowledge is discretionary. That's also what's interesting about this, is people just choose whether or not to relay the information. Here's another point that is a complicating point. We're not just talking about information in facts. It's not that someone just says, oh, I know this thing, and I'm just not going to pass it along. It could be an idea. And that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Why might they not pass it along? Fear. Fear has broken the feedback loop. Where does that fear come from? Maybe they had a prior experience where they had an idea or a piece of local knowledge and attempted to pass it on, and they were punished for it. And the person receiving the information said, oh, that's unimportant. Why did you even bother me with this? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's unimportant. Then I guess the next time I come across something I think you might find interesting, I'll just keep it to myself. Why? Because we're fearful of job loss. We're fearful of relatedness loss. We're fearful of all of the things that we already talked about, but that's where the rubber meets the road. So if the fear is present and it breaks the feedback loop, then the person will self-censor. They act defensively out of protection. They want to keep their job. Yeah. And so they will say, we're just going to go on the compliance track and you're not going to get any of my discretionary effort or my discretionary ideation, which is where a lot of innovation comes.
Here's another distinction, Junior, that's important to understand. So we talked about the top-down cascade of information, and then we talked about the bottom-up circulation of local knowledge. The top-down cascade of information is almost always part of the formal communications structure.
Send a big email.
Yeah, it could be an email. It could be a town hall meeting, right? It's the formal side of communication. The bottom-up circulation of local knowledge, and also the side-to-side, right, the lateral circulation of feedback, local knowledge, is almost always what? Informal. It's informal. So when fear breaks the feedback loop, we are cutting that off, both bottom-up and usually side-to-side.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.